Hi, my name is Dr. Bram Siegel. I'm Chair of Internal Medicine and Head of Infectious Diseases at Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center in Buffalo, and I'm also a professor of medicine at University at Buffalo School of Medicine. So what I'll try to do, I have a number of questions in front of me. What I'll do is I'll read the questions and I'll do my best to try to answer them. Okay, so we'll begin. What is an RNA vaccine? How new is this technology? Is there a risk of it changing, affecting one's DNA? So, an mRNA vaccine, if we just think of it biologically, DNA encodes mRNA, and then mRNA will encode proteins. Most vaccines that people will be familiar with actually have the protein, but in this case, we have two mRNA vaccines, one from Pfizer and one from Moderna. The basic thing is that the mRNA is going to be packaged into a vehicle. It'll be taken up by your own cells, and then that mRNA will be used to generate the spike protein. So that's an important protein that the SARS coronavirus 2 uses to attach to human cells. And when this spike protein is made by your own cells after you get the mRNA vaccine, the notion is that your own immune system will recognize it and generate antibodies against it. Is this a new technology? Relatively new. It's been developed for a number of years. It's one of the ways that's been developed is to use as a potential cancer vaccine or as an anti-infective vaccine for viral infection. One of the things that emerged is that when COVID hit us, there was a need to, in essence, the technology had already existed. So it was already existed, and then when we knew that it was that was a member of the SARS coronavirus family, and we knew how important the spike protein was, in essence, this technology that had been researched for many, many years was further developed and to basically use the technology to deliver RNA that will enable your own cells to make the spike protein. Is there a risk of it changing, affecting one's DNA? No, there's no risk for that. So what are the potential side effects of the vaccine? Are these the same side effects that we see from all vaccines? Or are there side effects that are unique to the mRNA vaccine? So far it's been well tolerated. The most common side effect is a sore arm. Sometimes people will just feel really fatigued after. That might be worse after the second shot versus the first. More significant side effects are actually very rare. We'll get to them a little bit later, but the most common side effect would be a sore arm and sometimes just feeling really tired. There sometimes could be some muscle aches. You might have some mild flu-like symptoms. No, these side effects are not unique to an mRNA vaccine. Is there any evidence for the vaccine affecting fertility? No, there's not that I know of. Menstruation, no. Pregnancy, no. In fact, there was just a paper just came out in the New England Journal of Medicine where they looked at pregnant women who received the vaccine, and there was no concern about any adverse safety signal. And this was a substantial number of people who they looked at. Likewise, nursing is fine if you've received the vaccine. There's no reason to not nurse and after you've received the vaccine. Are there concerns about myocarditis after the vaccine? So one thing I would point out is that the COVID-19 itself is associated with heart complications. It's also associated with vascular complications, including heart attack, stroke. The number of cases of myocarditis are really, really small relative to the number of people that have received the vaccine. So you never say that the risk is zero, but as compared to getting COVID, it's not a close call. The vaccine is far safer than a risk of getting COVID. Can we know the long-term effects if this is a relatively new type of vaccine, particularly considering how the research on the vaccine was expedited? So when we say expedited, it was expedited in terms of enrolling a lot of people because there was a pandemic throughout the world. So what happened is there was a huge investment to try to take the most promising vaccines and enroll a lot of people all over the world. So what happened is within a short period of time, tens of thousands of people were enrolled in these studies. But with that really super large amount of people, you get a very good idea about the efficacy and the safety. So in terms of expedited, it was expedited only in terms of putting in a lot of resources into enrolling people on an international level, but there weren't any safety. There wasn't anything on safety that was compromised. All of the review from a safety standpoint, in terms of the FDA, in terms of the advisors that the FDA uses, all of that was completely done in exactly the way it needed to be done. Now, in terms of long term, since the vaccines were only evaluated in 2020, a legitimate question is, well, we're only in 2021 now, so you're not going to have an extended safety record when the first people were enrolled in the study maybe a year ago, and so no, we obviously aren't going to have 2-year, 5-year, or 10-year safety data. But everything that we show right now in terms of the vaccine is showing a very, very good record for safety. And the CDC and other national and international bodies are actively monitoring any vaccine side effects. So if we see any kind of a signal, such as cases of myocarditis, which may not have been seen in the clinical trials that involve tens of thousands of people, but now when you have tens of millions of people, you may see some cases. All of that is actively being followed and reported. Likewise, the risk for clotting, which again seems to be extremely unlikely, but when you are now have millions of people immunized, even if there is a slight positive uptick, which I'm not sure how real it is, you're going to, this is something that is going to be recognized when you look at the data and it's reported. In terms of the sites that I would look at for reliability, I would rely on the CDC for the most reliable information, because we have an online system that's national where vaccine associated adverse events are reported. And for the ones that are so rare, they may be so rare that they're no higher than what you see in the general population anyway. But this is where it goes to CDC, and the CDC has been very good at reporting any concerns. So I think if you're going to pick one site to look at for any kind of rare side effects that may occur, or if you Google anything or hear of anything, I would just go right to the CDC website to see what they have to say. So is vaccine shedding, passing on side effects from one person to another possible? No. There's no way I could think it's possible. There's no way I see it as possible because it's not a live virus. And what is being done to track and report adverse vaccine effects? So if you have had the vaccine, as I have, as everyone who I know has, there is a system that I mentioned before, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. This is done through the CDC, and it's something that it's not unique to the COVID vaccines. It's for other vaccines as well, where you report individual adverse events that might occur, and then all of that is looked at in relation to a number of people who have gotten the vaccine, and then people at the CDC and elsewhere will say, is there a potential signal here? In other words, are we seeing these side effects more commonly than we otherwise would have seen in a general population? Let's see. Should someone who had COVID already get the vaccine? Yes. I'll get to that and the reason for that a little bit later. Are they at higher risk of adverse events? How long after illness should one get the vaccine? And Israel it was administering one dose for individuals who had COVID. Is that sufficient? So it's not easy to address whether that would be sufficient. So when you get natural COVID infection, you develop antibody responses, you develop other immune responses. So that is one way that you can develop immunity to COVID. It's obviously not the ideal way. The ideal way is to not have COVID and to be vaccinated. One advantage of the COVID vaccines is that they're very much focused on the spike protein, which is, again, that protein that the virus uses to attach to cells. So they're designed to increase your immune response to specifically that protein that's going to be most relevant to how the vaccine infects you. Okay. I would say when you're getting, if you have had COVID, what I would do is I would wait a period of time before getting a vaccine, because there are some people who develop very mild COVID and their symptoms resolve pretty quickly. There are others where it's much more substantial symptoms. My advice would be to wait. First of all, to wait at least 10 days. That's an absolute minimum. So that you're after diagnosis of COVID, so you're not infectious to anybody else. But I would, in fact, even double that. My own advice is to wait at least 20 days and until resolution of symptoms. At that point, if you get the COVID vaccine, any side effects would be that you have like fatigue or flu-like symptoms we could attribute to the vaccine and not sort of a lingering effect of the virus. The idea, I mean, there is precedent for sure for people to have more than one infection with COVID, and given the frequency now of variant strains that we're facing throughout our country, if you get the vaccine, that gives you that much more protection that you won't be infected with one of the variant strains. Israel administering one dose for individuals who had COVID. Is that sufficient? It might be. In general, the studies that were done with Moderna and Pfizer, they involved two vaccines 3 to 4 weeks apart. So that's the way we're doing it here. Whether after natural infection do you need two vaccines that follow? I would say it makes the most sense because it maximizes your chance of being protected for a longer period of time. Now, is the vaccine safe for children? How rigorous have the studies been for this age group to determine safety? Since children are so low risk, does it make sense to wait? So the Pfizer vaccine has FDA approval now going as young as age 12. And usually, the way it's done is once you, from age, the usual thing that then follows is that you will enroll kids on clinical trials and vaccinate and then conduct clinical trials on progressively younger age groups. So outside of a clinical trial, is the vaccine safe for children? Yes, and I'm now speaking specifically about the Pfizer vaccine because that's the one that has gotten FDA emergency use approval for kids 12 and up, and that's the one where we have the most solid data. I fully expect that Moderna vaccine and other vaccines will be safe for young children, but we want to go with the data we have rather than data that's being rather than data that we don't have. The studies are absolutely as rigorous as they've been done as the adults. Now, since children are so low risk, does it make sense to wait? It doesn't make sense to wait because I'm not sure what we would be waiting for. They are a potential reservoir to transmit to others. We want to vaccinate as much of the population as we can. And, one thing of concern is, yes, so far, now I don't want people to think that COVID is benign in kids, because it's usually not a big deal in kids, but there are a small proportion, a relatively tiny proportion of small children can have more significant problems associated with COVID. That's in the United States. There's data in Brazil that it is actually that's actually where you have a variant strain where it's much more aggressive in kids, and small children are dying of COVID in Brazil. So does that matter to us in the United States? Well, sure, from a humanitarian standpoint, it certainly does. But keep in mind that these strains are sort of spread on a global level, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think that we have to anticipate from a public health standpoint that there will be additional variant strains that may be more contagious, might be more aggressive, and may cause more significant illness in children. How efficacious are the vaccines with the new strains? Very good question. How good is one's immunity from having gotten COVID against these new strains? So this is a work in progress. And worst case, so as much as we know right now, is that for the predominant strains, that indeed the vaccines are going to be effective. Will they remain effective? Is there a potential where you've got, in essence, another variant that makes a really, a different spike protein, and that the vaccines we currently use are not going to be as effective or lose efficacy? It's something I'm concerned about. We have places, the RNA vaccines, which SARS coronavirus 2 is an RNA vaccine. They rapidly mutate. We have situations, I mentioned Brazil, but also India, where there's uncontrolled infection, large population densities, and there's clearly the opportunity that there will be strains, some of which may not be taken care of by vaccination, and there may be a need in the future for newer generation vaccines that address these variant strains. But knowing that, right now, from the strains that exist in the United States, we've seen the levels of COVID plummet. And, the best chance we have to prevent the emergence of these strains is to vaccinate now. Vaccinate as many as possible, as many people as possible, so we reduce the reservoir of COVID within our community and within our country. And then if there is introduction or development of the more variant strains that that the vaccine may not fully protect us against, I would still say that there's likely to be partial protection, and we may over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, there may be additional newer generation vaccines that we'll need to take care of the variant strains. But I would argue the best insurance we have, the best strategy we have to reduce the acquisition of variant strains in our community is for as many of us to be vaccinated. So does the data show that COVID is still a threat? It is a threat. Who are the people who are the people where COVID is a major threat? So I mentioned countries where you have large population densities with uncontrolled COVID infections. So on an international level, there's very clear places where you have big problems. I mentioned the potential for variant strains. So that is a big deal. Some of the variant strains are more contagious. The more contagious the strain, the greater need for herd immunity. In other words, a larger proportion of vaccinated people. Some of the variant strains are more aggressive, and I mentioned the one circulating in Brazil, in which there's a really big problem with childhood mortality. So this is really a different kind of strain that we have to be worried about. You also have immunocompromised patients where, for example, not most patients of cancer, most patients with cancer, for example, will mount very effective immune responses against the vaccine. Some of them, a minority, may not. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be immunized. They absolutely should, but we have to be just cognizant of the fact that the level of protection from vaccine won't be the same as people with normal immune systems. So that's clearly I work at a cancer center, so I do see that as a threat for those patients, again, who will be vaccinated, but they may not get the optimal response that we have with the general population. That's an even greater need for their household members and the family members and community at large to get immunized, to protect themselves and to protect these immune compromised patients. Okay, so who should not get the vaccine? Should everyone consult a medical professional to find out if it is the right choice for them? So the vaccine it should be used in everybody for whom it's approved for. So for the Pfizer vaccine, it's age 12 and up. For the other two that are licensed in the United States, the Moderna and the J&J vaccine, the vast majority of people should get it, and in my view, don't need to consult a medical professional. Many people will have allergies, food allergies, various allergies to antibiotics, seasonal allergies. The vaccine is safe in the vast majority of people with allergies. In the vaccines, they do use some stabilizers that very, very rarely can be associated with a significant allergic event. So if you have, and again, most people would, this would be the very, very rare number of people that could have an adverse, some sort of allergic response to some of the stabilizers that are used in the vaccine. If that's the case, the best thing is just discuss it with your doctor, and for a very tiny proportion of people in which there's a concern, they could be referred to an allergist. But again, for the vast majority of vaccines, for the vast majority of people, again, allergies are very common, and even people with allergies should be able to get this vaccine safely, and I'd strongly recommend that they do. Last question. So many people use the term experimental vaccine or experimental gene therapy in their questions. Do you feel that these terms are accurate? So experimental gene therapy is totally inaccurate. Gene therapy is totally inaccurate. There's absolutely nothing about these vaccines that modify your genes. It is not gene therapy. In terms of experimental vaccines, so I would use the term investigational. So when the vaccines were being evaluated in 2020, when it goes through different stages of evaluation, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. The phase 3 are the very large randomized trials. At that point, they're investigational, but then they were proven to be exceptionally effective and safe, and on that basis, they were given FDA approval. And so I would say that of the 3 vaccines that are available in the United States, none of them are experimental. All of them should be viewed as standard as people getting an MMR vaccine or a pneumonia vaccine. And so I wouldn't use the term experimental at all. They've proven to be safe and super effective. And I would, again, highly recommend that people get it. Thanks.